let's see. Yeah, I have here a presentation I call the Advanced Polar Surface Temperature and Sea Ice Monitoring. And essentially it's an overview of, or it's a selected overview of some of the research and development activities that that is going on and has taken place in the unit that I'm leading at DMI called Satellites and the Arctic. It's in the National Center for Climate Research. So that also means that there are a lot of contributors to this presentations, and I have tried to credit all of them as I go through the presentation, and I hope it worked. But it really it's a sort of a snapshot and a selected some selected topics that I thought would fit in here. So. Well, first, of course, the motivation. Why are we looking at the polar regions? Why are the polar regions interesting? If we start with the Arctic, well, I think you probably all know the issue here. Climate change is most pronounced in the Arctic. It's represented by these very famous OSISOF sea ice extent graphs and the trends, where the one to the left here is the Arctic sea ice extent, and you can see the very pronounced decline both in summer and winter time sea ice extent. And that with that sea ice extent, that a lot of associated feedbacks and associated changes occur, like diminishing snow cover, sea ice, land ice, and permafrost, and it's really transforming the Arctic and has far-reaching consequences. And it's been predicted in future scenarios that actually we will have ice-free summer in the Arctic by the 2050. Sorry. So that's a well-known story. A lot of changes have happened since the early 80s. But what's also then turning to the south in an Arctic and the Arctic sea ice extent, it has been relatively stable for many years. That's the middle figure here. But in the recent years, might be a tendency actually that we also see some kind of rapid or at least pronounced decrease in the Arctic sea ice. And to the figure to the very right is the Arctic sea ice extent as a function of months, where you can see the recent years, 23, 25, and also 22, have shown a really significant and record low sea ice minima in the sea ice around an Arctic. So maybe the Arctic is a precursor, the first mover in that respect, and an Arctic is coming in respect to sea ice loss. So a lot of things is going on. So it's important to monitor the polar regions and do it accurately. But there are also quite a few challenges when you do that, and that's what I'm trying to cover some of these in this talk at least. So I'll talk about the challenges for observing the sea surface temperature in the high latitudes. Then I'll go into the sea ice surface temperature because it is really dynamic regions, the polar regions, where you have a mix of open ocean, marginal ice zone, and sea ice. And then so I'll talk about the challenges for sea ice surface temperature. Then I'll talk about the challenges the challenges with this sea ice concentration and ST and IST consistency in these regions, and then something about assessing how can we in new ways assess the climate change in the polar regions using these products and the things and the new developments that we are seeing, and finally conclusion and way forward. So this is really just a snapshot of the issues, an example from our own backyard, I would say, from our own production. Many other examples have shown similar results. Just indicating here on the top figure to the left is really the validation for a climate data record for the SST CCI version 3. The AVHR validated as a function of latitude, and as you can see, well, first of all, it's a really a nice data set. I think it's probably the best, one of the most accurate data set that exists. Nevertheless, you can also see that at least for the, I don't know how obvious it is or how clear it is, but the top figure is, or the top graph is the mean difference, and the bottom line on the top panel is the standard deviation. So you can see that approaching the northern latitudes and in the Arctic, we really see some distinct differences and higher uncertainties, standard deviations, and a negative bias. And that's a level 3 product. It's taken as a level 3 in DMI system, as in the production of the global SST/IST that I'll come back to later. So that means that we have, just to illustrate that we do still have issues on the SST product accuracy in the high latitudes, and especially in the Arctic. In the southern hemisphere, it looks more stable for the level 3. And the lower panel is just from this C3S global SST level 4 DMI analysis, and also for the SST level 4 analysis, indicating that they've essentially, when you do a gap-free interpolated product based on these observations, this is also it resembles very much the sort of the input data. So there is an issue. It's not both in level 3 and level 4 with higher uncertainties, and that has been documented by, I think, several of you in this audience here as well, that the data and the level 4 products in particular are also show higher uncertainties in the high latitudes, and especially in the Arctic. So that's of course also connected with the infrared coverage, the very persistent cloud cover in the Arctic, shown up to the top right figure here, showing that we have persistent cloud cover and limited data return in the infrared. So what to do about that? I won't go in much detail on the SST retrievals today, but just say that what we have done and what we have been looking into is the microwave data records. Are they really the solution to some of this? And the answer is partially a yes. Pia, sitting over here, has made a nice publication on how to include the microwave sea surface temperatures in the level 4 production. And the panel here shows the improvement that led to, and where you can see that maybe I don't know how evident it is, but you can, at least on my screen, it's evident that you can see a larger improvement in the performance towards the higher latitudes by including microwave data. It was also evident from the study that you have to, including or blending, mixing microwave and infrared, you have to reference one product against each other, against each other in some way, because they have sort of distinct differences and distinct biases that could lead to some artifacts if you don't do that. And I think Mattia Sabatini has also a presentation on this for coastal regions. So including the microwave observations really improves, at least on the level 4 products in the high latitudes, and even making referencing the infrared to the microwave gives actually that was the best result that we could get. On the other hand, for consistency, and there might be other sort of arguments for doing it the other way around, adjusting the microwave to the infrared, because it's a longer climate data record, whereas the microwave starts in 2002, and then the infrared goes back to 82. But the message is that it can give improvements. There are also some limitations due to observations close to land and sea ice that of course restricts the number of microwave data. But at least it's not the cloud cover, because they can see through non-precipitating clouds. So observe through that in those conditions. So that's encouraging, and of course with the new the launch of AMSAT3 and with SIMR also coming, I think this is something to really take advantage of in the future. So a few slides about the sea ice surface temperatures and some of the challenges that we are facing there. First of all, it's relatively new compared to the established SST community and the SST science, and so we are mostly also in the high latitude task team. There's been talks about what is sea ice surface temperature actually, how to define it, and maybe having some reference figure similar to the very famous GRIST SST figure that was made many years ago, but it's really helpful in order to talk about SSTs and different ways of skin, subskin, foundation, and so on for users. And we have tried in a similar way to see if I made the first steps in order to have derive such a figure for sea ice surface temperature. So I'll talk about that, and then something about collection of reference observations is important in the Arctic to validate and improve on the retrievals and the cloud masking. Then I'll talk about the retrievals and consistency, and about inconsistency for different infrared IST products. And in the end, I'll also touch upon the microwave IST. So this is, well, this might be a bit busy figure. I apologize for that. It is really as I said, the first take of creating a reference figure, or a figure that can be used to understand the conditions and talk about the conditions for the sea ice. It is it's created by Hu Yong from DI, but it's really an extract of the a thermistor observations from a thermistor chain, which has been, as you can see on the right here, it's been drilled into sea ice and measure and put all the way through into the ocean, and then it measures the temperature in the ocean, in the sea ice, and then the snow, and then the surface air with a resolution of I think it's 2 centimeters along this thermistor string. So at this and these two middle panels here, we have just extracted the mean conditions throughout the year for that thermistor chain and for selected buoys, where you can see the locations to the very left. But as you can see, that indicates, well, first of all, the ocean temperature at the ice-ocean interface is relatively stable, and that's also, of course, what we would expect. It differs a little bit in the location due to the sea ice growth and shrinkage and in the thickness, but essentially it's very stable. And then we have the temperature profile throughout the year that changes. The left panel is from October to June, so it's really I would say freezing and start of the melting season, whereas the right panel is from August to October, so that's really from the melting season and then into the refreezing again on the multi-year ice surface, multi-year ice sea ice flow. So you can see that these conditions really show that and the error bars on the observation shows the variability, which is also in the table below. So in general, the conditions changes a lot throughout the year. It's always almost always the case that the snow sea ice interface is warmer than the sea ice surface due to the heat flux from the ocean below and through the sea ice. And the temperature profile in the sea ice differs a little bit according to the seasons, as you see. So, but we always have a temperature gradient between the sea, snow, and sea ice interface and the snow surface, snow skin surface. That's important to note. And that difference depends on the actual thickness of the snow layer. And as you can see on the right, the yellow line on the right shows, for instance, a condition where we have more than 25 centimeters of snow, and that gives a mean difference between the two observations of more than I think 15 degrees Celsius throughout that month of October. So there are some differences, and also the variability is of course larger for the snow surface than the snow and sea ice interface. So why is this important? Well, it's important because looking at observations and trying to validate your observations in the Arctic, then most of the observations comes from the equivalent of our drifting buoys in the sea surface temperature world, where there are put out these ISVP buoys on the sea ice to measure pressure and temperature. But once these buoys are put out, they only measure at one position, and once these buoys are covered in snow, it gives you a completely different thing than the snow skin surface, which we measure from infrared satellites. So we have to really think about carefully on how to collect reference observations in the Arctic. And that's something that some activities that DMI has been carrying out for quite some time in Qaanaaq. It's in the northwestern Greenland, where we have a station there, a field station where we have put out instruments since 2011. And this is just an example of 2 days of a time series where we measure both 1 meter, 2 meter temperatures, the infrared skin surface temperatures, and then the thermal interface of the snow and sea ice, and sort of all the different parameters in the snow sea ice system. So that's important reference data that we are collecting. But we also need to look at some other ways of getting cheap and easily deployed reference data. And that's obtained in this project called TRUSTED, which is a Copernicus-funded project from EUMETSAT that GORM is participating in, where we are helping out in designing and developing a sea ice reference buoy that can measure the temperature from the snow sea ice interface and up into the air. And as you can see on the figure here to the left, this is just an example of the first sort of prototype deployment that we did this winter. And we will now we'll examine those data, and we are giving feedback on the design and on the performance of that instrument, and that will lead to hopefully a deployment of the first batch of these trusted ice buoys. Because it is really important that we have good reference data, because this is in order to determine to improve the retrievals, to look at the errors characteristics of the satellite data, and also improve on the cloud screening. And this is illustrated by well, it's not illustrated, but the inconsistency between the different satellite products is illustrated in this figure here, which is a paper that we have in preparation, and I think there is also a poster on that, where we look at 5 different products of satellite infrared ice surface temperatures. It's covering from MODIS Aquaterra and SLSTR A and B, and these 4 products are from the LST CCI project. And then we compare also against our own DMI and the METNO developed ASTI climate data record. And these are just examples referencing the different satellite products against each other throughout the 2 years. And as you can see, we have large differences. There is a tendency that the LST CCI products are more alike, whereas the ASTI comparing the LST CCI against the ASTI data, that's in the bottom 4 panels here, shows larger seasonal variations. And that's of course interesting to explore in details and to figure out the reason for this. But actually, and these are large differences. If you can see, it's up to several degrees differences between the different satellite products. but it's actually not that easy to quantify where if the ASTI product is behaving has a seasonal pattern in the performance, or if it's the LST CCI products that have this seasonal performance. So just to tell you that even with these large variations and the comparison against trying to look and validate against the existing IST observation is actually not really easy to figure out. But we're working on that and collecting data and looking into more in situ data is hopefully the key to figure out and reference these, validate these data, because they have to, as you can see, there were these large inconsistency between the products. They really have to be referenced also against each other, and there must be some. I mean, the reasons for these differences are really interesting to figure out. Yes. Okay, then. So there is some work to do on the IST retrievals for sure at some parts where when more and more products are coming out for infrared satellite IST. And that's something that we're also working on at DMI, where Zoe and Gorm are working on looking into improving the classical IST retrievals, and not just improving the retrievals, but also trying to understand the causes for the outliers, for the bad retrievals, and try to model the error characteristics of the ice surface temperature and to identify the bad retrievals, which can be due to cloud contamination or other issues. We know it's cloud screening in the Arctic is a challenging business. Similar to for SST, we could also look into for infrared SST, we could also look into the microwave. And this is what we have done here. One serious challenge, though, is that the microwave IST signal, the sort of the emission depth or where this signal comes from is really the snow and sea ice interface. And as you remember, I hope you remember from the sort of reference figure before, there is a distinct difference between the snow surface temperature and the sea and the sea ice and snow interface. So that creates a challenge. But again, it's a relatively well covered region. It's well covered with the microwave observations, again seeing through clouds, but then providing a little bit different sort of variable than the snow ice surface temperatures. But it's something we're working on. I mean, there's on the other hand, it's a different information, but there is also some additional information in the microwave, because then that has the difference tends to mimic will be closely connected, as I also mentioned earlier, with the snow thickness. So once if we can figure out in some smart way and have a reliable snow thickness, then we might be able also to reference and include and combine infrared IST with microwave IST. And that's something we're working on right now. We're working on the IST retrievals in various projects. Ranging from the SIMA L2 pad, developing an IST product for SIMA, but we also have the plans to include in the next OSISAF project phase to include and to set up an AMSA near real-time SST IST product. And of course, it's I would say much more tricky than the infrared due to yes, thank you. It's much more tricky in the infrared due to this difference and the ocean and sea ice. I'll hurry up then. Okay, I will. So now we have SST, IST, and then the combination of SST and IST is really where there's a lot of potential because of the seasonal changes in the sea ice cover. So we have been looking into the sea ice concentration and IST consistency. And first, the SIC, sea ice concentration consistency. There is quite a lot of work done, and I think it's mostly IDA, but also others who are in the group that are looking into different sea ice concentration products. And as you can see, the three products to the left, the OC458, the SICK high resolution, and the OC450 are all passive microwave-based sea ice products. And you can see they differ quite a lot, whereas to the left is, for now we can call it a reference sea ice product. It's a high resolution sea ice concentration product based on SAR that also is developed by DMI using machine learning AI techniques. So anyway, we have some inconsistency in the sea ice products, looking at different sea ice products, and that's also evident from this figure here, where it's a heat map showing the SST on the x-axis and the sea ice concentration on the y-axis. And then as you can see there, we have a lot of, we have some similarities, but also for warm surface temperatures, we have some discrepancies between the different sea ice products. We want to use the sea ice concentration into our SST-IST products and get the best sea ice mask that we can get. And so we have created some filtering that really tends to align and tends to improve the consistency between the sea ice products. That's the bottom three panels that shows the filtered data here. It's IDA's work. There is a poster on that. And we have also compared the sea ice concentration product against Landsat 8 sea ice concentration product developed by SNU, the Seoul National University, and in collaboration with them, we have used their product to validate the different sea ice product, and it shows improvement when we do the combined multi-sensor sea ice concentration product. Okay, so now we have some consistent sea ice product. We have SST-IST, and then we combine it all into a combined level 4 SST-IST analysis. And I won't talk about that, the creation of that today. Pia will go in more detail with that. I'll just talk about what can we then do and what are we working on in order to derive the different and monitoring the polar conditions. We're working on extending the sea ice surface temperature to 2 meter temperature over sea ice. That's some work that was done a few years ago in Eustis. It's a Horizon Europe project. But we're now improving that using machine learning AI methods. And the figure to the left shows the improvement, which are in particular during the summertime. And it's something we'll work on in this ESA project called Motokusuma that Chris and his group is also involved in. Then we can use the product to evaluate climate models and ERA5 analysis. And this is just an example showing that actually we, in the last IPCC AR6 report, it was stated that the CMIP6 models, climate models, were too cold in the Arctic. And using our data, we actually discovered that that's not the case. It's because they use the ERA5 as a benchmark, which is too warm, which is seen in the panel here. And we can also look at indicators. You're looking at Alex has a poster where he's looking into the over ice marine heat waves and also cold spells. And this is the frequency, the timeline of the frequency of both cold spells and heat waves over the sea ice. And as you can see, we have a distinct decline in the cold spells and an increase in the marine heat wave, having this consistent products. And I think lastly, we just have this. Also have this indicator where we look at sea ice concentration and IST over IST, and as the years go by, and as you can see, we have some interesting information in this product where you can see the progress as we go throughout the year and throughout the years. And the recent years we're really having some distinct changes. Conclusions. I think that's. So conclusions, there is still room for improvement for the Arctic SST retrievals. There is a role of microwave SST that can improve at least level 4 products, but there are also some limitations in the data coverage. And there is need for reference. I did different IFC observations and to have more understand better the uncertainty components in the products. There is a need for a multi-sensor CIS concentration product because that gives improved CIS mask, and that's very important when you try to combine SST and IST and the marginalized zone. And then lastly, there is a large potential for these products that cover both the SST and the IST and give a consistent and improved view on the polar changes in the climate. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you, Jakob, and good luck with all the challenges. The questions will be taken after the 3 first talks before the coffee break. So we go straight to the next speaker, which is Huoyan Shi from DMI. He'll be talking to us about CIS surface temperatures from C-band passive microwave observations.
So fancy microphone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Huoyan Shi from Danish Meteorological Institute, and but where's my slide?